All right, so let's say you're in Greece, right? You want to say yes. You think, okay, I got this. I'm going to nail this. You go with a nice confident yes. But, well, it turns out in Greece that yes might not actually get you where you think it's going to get you.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we're going to unpack some of the most surprising things about traveling to Greece. All about those unexpected moments that tend to catch visitors off guard.
Yeah, these firsthand accounts, these are really valuable because they offer insights that you often won't find in those, kind of polished travel brochures.
Exactly. So we're going to help you navigate those potential surprises so you can feel confident and ready for your own Greek adventure.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's get back to this whole yes conundrum. So in Greek, yes is actually nai, which sounds a bit like nay, and then no is ohai. It sounds more like ohai. Now you might think, okay, got it, just a couple of new words. It highlights how these simple words can lead to some, shall we say, interesting misinterpretations, especially when you first arrive.
Right, because, I think we often assume that those basic words, those yeses and nos, will just translate directly across languages. But Greece, it throws you a bit of a curveball right off the bat.
It really does. Give some great examples of this. Imagine you're at a restaurant and you ask the waiter, is this dish good? And they say, nai, like with a lot of enthusiasm.
You'd naturally think, okay, this dish must be fantastic.
Exactly. But then imagine you're trying to find, let's say, a museum. And you ask someone for directions. And you point in a direction, they say, nai. But it turns out that museum is actually in the complete opposite direction.
Oh, so now that yes has taken on a whole different meaning.
Right. And it can be a little bewildering. The video talks about how some tourists even start to think, are these friendly locals, like, messing with me?
Yeah, I can see how that would happen, but it really just comes down to that linguistic difference.
It does. And while, the Greek people are incredibly welcoming, being aware of this little quirk from the get-go can really smooth out those first interactions.
It's a good reminder that sometimes those initial assumptions we make about communication, they don't always hold true.
Definitely. And speaking of things that might not be what they seem, let's talk about the Greek sun. It's full of praise for those amazing beaches, in places like Crete or the Peloponnese.
Oh, those beaches are incredible.
The crystal clear water, it's paradise, but there's a bit of a trickster at play.
A trickster.
Yeah, that beautiful Mediterranean breeze.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
You're lounging on the beach, enjoying this lovely breeze, thinking this is perfect. But what you might not realize is just how strong the sun actually is.
Right, because that breeze can really mask the intensity of the sun's rays. You might not feel like you're getting burned, but trust me, those UV rays are doing their work.
They are. Especially those with fairer skin, who end up getting severely sunburned. Like, they turn this almost purplish color.
Ouch!
And the video specifically mentions Scandinavian tourists. They come from a place where the sun isn't nearly as strong, and they just get absolutely hammered by the Greek sun.
So that advice to apply sunblock frequently,
yeah,
it's not just a casual suggestion?
Not at all. It's essential. Like, you got to lather up if you want to avoid a painful and, let's be honest, not very attractive souvenir from your trip.
Definitely good advice.
Now let's shift gears completely and talk about time. Or I should say Greek time.
Greek time. That sounds intriguing.
It is. See, in Greece, time, especially in social situations, it's a bit more, shall we say, fluid.
Fluid? How so?
Well, imagine this. You call your friends in Greece and you say, hey, what are you guys up to? Want to get together? And they say, yeah, come on over. Food will be ready in an hour.
Okay, sounds good.
So you show up an hour later, ready to eat.
Yeah.
But surprise, the food is nowhere near ready. Like, it might be another 2 hours before you actually sit down to eat.
Oh, wow. So an hour doesn't really mean an hour.
Not necessarily. It's more of a loose guideline.
I guess that's where the whole fluid concept comes in.
Exactly. It's all about a more relaxed approach to schedules and social settings.
So if someone says 5 minutes, maybe mentally add on a little buffer.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the interesting thing, that this more relaxed sense of time, it doesn't really apply to things like public transportation. Trains, buses, planes, they tend to run on schedule.
So it's more about understanding, I guess, the context.
Yeah.
When are you more likely to encounter this, more fluid sense of time?
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to navigating crowds. Or, well, maybe I should say the lack of structured crowds.
What do you mean?
So the video talks about this, how tourists will be like dutifully forming these neat and tidy lines, waiting to, let's say, board a ferry.
Right.
And then when the boarding actually starts, It just turns into this like massive wave of people, all kind of surging forward at the same time.
Oh, so not so much a line anymore.
A dash kind of smush.
A mad dash kind of smush.
But not really a mad dash because it's like this slow kind of sauntering all at the same time.
Okay, so a unique kind of crowd dynamic.
Exactly. It's definitely something to be prepared for. Which, speaking of, let's talk about getting around.
All right, let's talk about driving.
If you're planning to really explore Greece, venture beyond the major cities, especially those beautiful regions like Crete and the Peloponnese, the video highly recommends renting a car. But there are a few things you got to be aware of.
What kind of thing?
Well, first off, if you're from North America, you'll need an international driver's license.
Right. That's essential.
Definitely. Get that sorted out before you go. And second, the video describes Greek drivers as, get this, middle of rally drivers.
Middle of rally drivers.
Yeah, which gives you an idea of, how confident and perhaps how fast they drive, especially on those smaller, winding, hilly roads.
Okay. So be prepared for some spirited driving.
Exactly. And here's another thing. In Greece, it's not uncommon for drivers to use the shoulder to let faster cars pass.
Really?
Yeah. Which, you don't see that in a lot of other places. So as a tourist, if you're driving a bit slower and staying in the middle of the lane, like you're probably used to, just be aware that someone might come zipping past you on the shoulder.
All right. Good to know.
Now, after you've navigated those interesting driving experiences, you're bound to encounter the incredible Greek hospitality.
Ah, yes. The famous Greek hospitality.
The video talks about how welcoming the people are, especially if you make an effort to speak a little Greek. Even just a few words, goes a long way.
I've heard that the Greek people are incredibly generous.
They really are. And the video shares this great story about the host, who, despite only knowing a little bit of Greek, ends up making friends with some older Greek men while, having drinks together.
That's wonderful.
That's a great example of how, just a bit of effort can lead to these genuine connections. And this generosity, it extends to the food, too, like in a big way.
Oh, the food in Greece is amazing.
It is. But be warned, the portions are huge, like seriously huge.
Huge? Like how huge?
And sharing dishes, because otherwise, you might end up with way more food than you can handle.
That's a good tip.
And then, just when you think you're completely stuffed, they often bring out like complimentary fruit or a little dessert.
Even when you're already full.
Even when you're full. Like juicy watermelon, fresh figs, creamy yogurt, stuff like that.
It's so nice.
It is. It's like this final gesture of, we're so glad you're here. Please enjoy.
It really adds to that sense of warmth and generosity, doesn't it?
It totally does. Okay, now let's move on to something a bit less idyllic, and that's the unfinished buildings.
Unfinished buildings?
Yeah, you might notice like buildings with exposed rebar sticking out or missing railings, things like that.
Oh, that's interesting. Why is that?
Well, the video suggests it might be due to like less strict enforcement of building codes. And they also mentioned that unfinished properties might have some tax advantages.
So it could be a combination of factors.
It probably is. But anyway, the video recommends being cautious, especially if you're traveling with kids, because, what might seem like just part of the landscape could actually be a safety hazard.
Right. Good point.
All right, let's talk about the Greek islands. Those iconic destinations like Crete, Rhodes, Santorini, the places that like fill up travel magazines.
Oh, I love the Greek islands.
They're beautiful. But the video points out something really interesting. It talks about how there's a huge difference between visiting in the summer versus visiting in the winter.
A difference? How so?
Well, in the summer, it's like party time. The islands are packed with tourists. The beaches are bustling. It's that classic Greek island vibe.
Okay, that sounds fun.
It is. But in the winter, it's a completely different story. Like, the islands are practically deserted.
Really?
Yeah, it's way quieter, more peaceful. Prices are lower, but a lot of the tourist shops and restaurants are closed.
So it depends on what you're looking for, I guess.
Exactly. And here's another thing. The video mentions that even in the winter, the weather on some of the islands, like Crete, can be surprisingly mild.
Huh. You wouldn't think of the Greek islands as a winter destination.
Right. But it's possible. And just a little heads up, if you're thinking about those overnight ferry trips, you might want to consider booking a cabin. Apparently, it can be quite an adventure, especially if you're trying to sleep out on deck.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Now, of course, we can't talk about Greece without talking about its incredible history. The video mentions just how many ancient Greek and Roman sites there are.
Yeah, Greece is like a living history book.
It is. The Acropolis, the Parthenon, Delphi, Marathon, Olympia, Knossos. The list goes on and on. And what's so cool is that you could actually visit these places. You can see these incredible remnants of civilizations that, we've all read about in history books.
It must be amazing to walk among those ancient ruins, to actually experience those places firsthand.
It really is. And the video talks about how proud the Greek people are of their history. And it's not just a matter of preserving these sites. It's reflected in their culture, their food, their everyday lives. And it's not just the famous landmarks either. Even smaller towns and villages have their own historical significance.
So history is kind of woven into the fabric of life in Greece.
It really is. Okay, now let's talk about some of those modern-day quirks. Like things you might not find in a typical tourist guidebook. For instance, you'll notice a lot of smoking in Greece.
Oh, right. I've heard about that.
Yeah, it's much more common there than in many other Western countries. And another thing, get ready to toss your used toilet paper in the bin next to the toilet.
What? Why?
Well, a lot of the plumbing is older, and it can't handle toilet paper.
Okay, that makes sense.
And speaking of toilets, be prepared for missing toilet seats in some of the tavernas and cafes.
No toilet seats.
Yeah, it's a thing. And another interesting observation, the video mentions that those traditional coffee houses, the cafeteria in the smaller villages, they're often filled with, older men. Not so much the grandmothers.
Oh, that's funny. You'd expect it to be the other way around.
Right. But hey, every culture has its own little quirks.
That's true.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the bill.
The bill?
Yeah, even paying the bill in Greece comes with its own unique twist. So get this, when you ask for the bill, they'll often bring you a complimentary drink, like a shot of raki, ouzo, tsipuro, something like that. And sometimes even a little dessert. And then a few minutes later, they bring the actual bill.
So you get a treat before you have to pay.
Exactly. It's like a thank you for dining with us.
That's such a nice touch.
It is. It really reinforces that whole slowly attitude.
It's like they're saying, don't rush, relax, enjoy the moment.
Exactly.
Ready to set sail.
Absolutely. Let's chart a course for Santorini. And what better way to arrive than at sunrise, sailing right into that caldera, a breathtaking sight as the sun paints the sky.
You're right there witnessing this dramatic landscape unfold before your eyes. And it really hits home that this island wasn't always shaped like this. It was once a complete circle until a massive, and I mean massive, volcanic eruption around 3,500 years ago blew a chunk out of it.
Talk about a force of nature. That eruption created the flooded caldera we see today. And rising from its edges are those iconic villages clinging to the cliffs, whitewashed buildings, those blue domes. It's the postcard image of the Greek islands.
The video singles out Oioda as that quintessential postcard village, and you can't argue with that. It's the dream destination for artists and honeymooners, and for good reason. But have you ever wondered why they're all whitewashed? It's more than just aesthetics.
Yeah, the video delves into that, and it turns out there's a lot of practicality behind those pristine white walls. Reflecting the intense Mediterranean sun to keep things cool, the lime used in the wash acts as a natural disinfectant, and they even use the rooftops to purify rainwater. It makes you appreciate those picture-perfect scenes even more.
It really does. And speaking of those buildings, it's fascinating that many of them started as humble caves dug into the cliffs. Limited building materials on the island meant utilizing the natural insulation of the volcanic rock.
Imagine that, going from cave dwellings to some of the most sought-after and expensive real estate. Talk about a transformation. The video then explores the various ways you can experience Santorini from a cruise ship. It highlights organized bus tours, which seem like a great way to hit those key landmarks like the volcanic Kameni Islands.
Those islands made entirely of lava rock. Yeah, that's a sight to behold. And a bus tour makes sense for those who want to see a lot in a limited time without the hassle of figuring out the logistics.
Exactly.
We offer the best travel prices, which you won't find anywhere else. Please check the description and verify this for yourself.
Of course, there's always the option of going it alone, grabbing a map, and venturing out on your own. It really caters to different travel styles and budgets.
For sure. And the video shares insights from a private guide, mentioning the impact of the 1956 earthquake that devastated the island, and pointing out remnants of a Venetian fortress dating back to the 14th century. A good reminder that beneath that stunning scenery, there's a deep and often dramatic history.
Absolutely. And no trip to Greece is complete without savoring the food. The video focuses on Kamari Beach, known for its black volcanic sand and those classic Greek seafood tavernas. The comparison between the Santorini salad and the typical Greek salad is quite interesting.
Oh yeah, that Santorini salad with those flavorful cherry tomatoes, local cucumbers, goat cheese instead of feta, and those briny capers and caper leaves. And the grilled sardines, the calamari, it all sounds so fresh and delicious.
It really showcases that healthy Mediterranean diet. The video then takes us to Fira, the main town, and the island's transportation hub. Imagine this bustling main street filled with shops, cafes, restaurants, all vying for that prime caldera view.
It sounds incredibly vibrant. You can find those authentic moments, like enjoying a drink at a cliffside bar with fellow travelers. That's the essence of travel, isn't it?
Those unscripted moments are often the most memorable. And the departure from Santorini sounds equally magical, taking the cable car back down to the old port, soaking in that relaxed atmosphere as the crowds thin out in the final hour before the last tender departs. It's like a final farewell to this extraordinary island.
It leaves you wanting more. Once you're in Mykonos town, the video encourages you to just wander and soak it all in. It paints a picture of this charming waterfront, a small beach right there in town, and those narrow lanes lined with white stucco buildings, blue trim, and bursts of bougainvillea.
Those lanes are iconic. And of course, no mention of Mykonos is complete without those windmills, a reminder of the island's seafaring past when they were used to grind grain. And then there's Little Venice, those houses built right on the water's edge by wealthy shipping merchants, now transformed into inviting restaurants and bars.
Mykonos has a reputation for being quite fashionable, with its high-end boutiques and a vibrant nightlife. But alongside the more modern elements, the video highlights the enduring traditional culture, like that small church where they still offer blessings to those who work at sea. It's a nice reminder that beyond the glitz and glamour, there's a rich history and a strong sense of community. That peek into the authentic local life is crucial. And then, of course, there are the beaches. The video contrasts Paradise Beach, known for its non-stop party atmosphere, with the much quieter Agios Sostis, described as an old hippie beach with stunning sand and water. It just goes to show the range of experiences Mykonos offers.
From high-energy beach clubs to tranquil escapes, there's something for everyone. And just a short boat ride away lies the island of Delos, a place steeped in ancient Greek history. The video describes it as one of the most significant locations in the ancient world, the legendary birthplace of Apollo and Artemis.
And it attracted pilgrims for centuries before Christ. Talk about ancient history. The video explains Delos' importance in 3 distinct periods. As a religious sanctuary, then as the treasury of the Athenian League, think Fort Knox of the ancient world, and finally as a major Roman commercial port, rivaling the likes of Olympia, Athens, and Delphi.
That's a serious historical resume. The video then takes us through what remains of that ancient harbor, the shops, homes, temple ruins, and those striking marble lions that guard the site. Imagine Delos in its prime, a bustling center of trade with thousands of shops, opulent houses decorated with intricate mosaics, a large theater, and even advanced plumbing and cisterns.
And those wells that still function today after more than 2,000 years, supplying fresh water. It boggles the mind. But then, around a century before Christ, war led to Delos' decline, and it was eventually abandoned, left to the elements for centuries until its rediscovery and excavation in the late 1800s. It's a reminder of the cyclical nature of history.
The video suggests climbing to the summit of Delos with that panoramic view of the surrounding islands. There's the theory that the name Cyclades, this group of islands, comes from their circular arrangement around Delos, their historical and geographical center. It's a compelling connection. And so, from the ancient wonders of Delos, our cruise continues eastward to Rhodes. What jumped out at you about Rhodes?
The arrival in Rhodes has a completely different feel. Those imposing fortified town walls are a clear sign of its layered history, with Italian, Greek, Turkish, and medieval Crusader influences shaping the island over centuries. You can almost sense the weight of history as you approach the harbor.
And speaking of history, the video reminds us that Rhodes itself was a major player in the ancient world, home to the Colossus of Rhodes, that gigantic bronze statue of the sun god Helios, considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Sadly, it was destroyed by an earthquake long before the time of Christ, but its legend lives on.
A true testament to the power of myth and legend. And then we have the Knights of St. John Hospitallers, also known as the Knights of Malta. They initially served to protect pilgrims and provide medical care during the Crusades. Over time, they evolved into this powerful religious order, soldiers of the cross, with their own economic clout and a formidable navy. And in 1309, they made Rhodes their headquarters, transforming it into that heavily fortified European city we see remnants of today.
It's fascinating how it highlights the Street of the Knights, where the different nationalities within the order, Spanish, French, German, built their respective headquarters. That street still has a very medieval feel, with those carved reliefs showcasing their heritage. And the Palace of the Grand Master, built in the 14th century and later rebuilt after damage from the Ottomans, its fortifications really underline the constant threat they faced.
But even the mightiest fortresses can fall. In the 1500s, the Ottoman Turks defeated the Knights, forcing them to retreat to Malta, and Rhodes then became part of the Ottoman Empire for centuries. And that Turkish influence is still very much present in Rhodestown today.
Absolutely. The video takes us to Epocrates Square, the vibrant heart of the old town, now a bustling center for both tourists and artists. It describes those narrow, maze-like back lanes, reminiscent of a traditional bazaar, and the main shopping street that still feels like a Turkish market, with that 500-year-old minaret of the Mosque of Suleiman the Magnificent dominating the skyline.
It's a fascinating blend of cultures. And there's also a literal meeting of worlds right there at the city beach, where the Aegean and Mediterranean seas converge, with Turkey just a stone's throw away. But the video doesn't stop at Rhodestown. It also takes us to Lindos, often hailed as the most beautiful town on the island.
Lindos sounds truly special. It's strategically located, with natural harbors, and that Acropolis perched high above the town, offering a commanding view. The Acropolis itself has a long and storied past, first as a temple dedicated to Athena, and then transformed into a Crusader fortress. And the town below, with its whitewashed buildings, was once a thriving maritime center. Today, it's a popular tourist destination, filled with hotels and shops housed in those former sea captains' residences.
And you can't forget those Lindos taxis, those adorable donkeys carrying visitors up to the Acropolis. It's a classic Greek island image. But Lindos also boasts stunning beaches. There's the sandy, family-friendly Lindos Beach and the more secluded St. Paul's Bay, named after the Apostle Paul's legendary visit.
It's such a striking contrast to see those vacationers enjoying the sun and sand, seemingly oblivious to the weight of history that surrounds them. So there you have it, a land where yes might not always mean what you think it means, where the sun is a force to be reckoned with, and where time, in social situations, takes on a life of its own.
A place with unique driving customs, incredibly generous people, and a fascinating blend of ancient history and modern-day quirks.
It's a country that's full of surprises, that's for sure. And, it's these surprises, these unexpected moments, that can often lead to the most memorable travel experiences.
Absolutely. It's all about being open to the unexpected, embracing those cultural differences, and, just going with the flow.
Exactly. So, the next time you find yourself in Greece, remember those friendly locals who might steer you in the wrong direction with a smile and an eye, the sun that's always stronger than it feels, and that delicious food that just keeps on coming.
And don't forget to savor those moments. Embrace that siga-siga spirit. You might just discover a new rhythm, a new way of experiencing the world that stays with you long after you've left those beautiful Greek shores.
Beautifully said. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.